The fat you can grab with your hand is not the fat that kills you. The fat that kills you is deeper. It is packed tight around your liver, wrapped around your pancreas, threaded between loops of your intestines like shrink wrap around a package. You cannot pinch it. You cannot see it in a mirror. And it is not just sitting there. Visceral fat is alive. It functions like a rogue organ, pumping inflammatory chemicals directly into the blood supply that feeds your liver. Every second of every day, it is quietly poisoning you from the inside out. Most people treat belly fat like a cosmetic problem. Cut calories, do some crunches, and wait for the body to slim down evenly. But visceral fat does not play by those rules. It has a completely different receptor profile and a far richer blood supply than the soft fat under your skin. That means certain interventions barely touch it, while others target it like a guided missile. The fastest way to eliminate visceral fat is not the same as generic weight loss advice, not even close. What I'm going to walk you through today is a 4-method escalating protocol, each one backed by randomized controlled trials and clinical imaging data, not opinion. We are starting with 3 methods anyone can begin today using nothing more than groceries and a pair of running shoes. Each method is more powerful than the last. And then there is a 4th, a method so aggressive it makes the first 3 look slow by comparison. I am saving it for the end because it deserves the full context of everything that comes before it. For each method, you will get the exact mechanism, the precise dose, and the clinical results so you understand why it works on visceral fat specifically. This is not a tips list. This is a ranked protocol. Method 1 starts in your kitchen. Method 1 is the simplest thing on this list, and it works at the level of your DNA. Carotenoids. These are the pigments that make carrots orange, tomatoes red, and spinach dark green. They are fat-soluble compounds, meaning they dissolve in fat and accumulate in fatty tissue. Here is what makes them relevant to visceral fat specifically, because visceral fat has a much richer blood supply than the soft fat under your skin. Carotenoids get delivered to visceral fat at higher concentrations. They collect there. And once they arrive, they do something remarkable. They walk into the nucleus of your fat cells and flip genetic switches. Carotenoids bind to nuclear receptors called PPAR gamma and RXR. Think of these as control panels for fat metabolism. When carotenoids activate them, 2 things happen simultaneously. Your fat-burning genes turn on. Your fat storage genes turn off. This is not a metaphor. This is epigenetic reprogramming. Your visceral fat cells physically change what they are doing at the genetic level. A Japanese randomized double-blind trial put this to the test. 8 weeks of high carotenoid vegetable intake and CT scans showed measurable reductions in visceral fat area. Not body weight in general, visceral fat specifically. The sources are simple: carrots, sweet potatoes, cooked tomatoes, spinach, kale. One critical detail: because carotenoids are fat soluble, you need to eat them with some dietary fat or your gut barely absorbs them. A drizzle of olive oil on your cooked vegetables is not a garnish. It is a delivery mechanism. And the effect goes beyond just shrinking the fat. Carotenoids reprogram existing visceral fat cells to become less inflammatory, partially reversing the toxic signaling that made that fat dangerous in the first place. You are not just losing fat, you are disarming it. Method 2 attacks from a completely different angle, and it blocks visceral fat at 3 points simultaneously. Green tea catechins, specifically a compound called EGCG, short for epigallocatechin gallata. Here's the triple block. First, catechins inhibit an enzyme called pancreatic lipase. This is the enzyme your gut uses to break down dietary fat for absorption. Block it, and 10 to 25% of the fat you eat passes straight through you undigested. That is pharmacologically the same thing the weight loss drug Orlistat does, just milder and from a tea leaf. Second, EGCG activates a metabolic sensor called AMPK in your liver and fat tissue. AMPK is like an energy alarm. When it fires, your cells shift from storing fat to burning it. Third, and this is where it gets clever, catechins and caffeine work together in a way neither can do alone. Caffeine blocks an enzyme that breaks down norepinephrine, the hormone that tells fat cells to release their contents. That keeps norepinephrine active longer. Meanwhile, catechins block a separate enzyme called COMT that also degrades norepinephrine, two different shields protecting the same fat-burning signal. The result is sustained fat mobilization that specifically drains visceral depots. A 12-week randomized controlled trial tested this with 600 milligrams of catechins per day. That is roughly 3 to 4 cups of matcha, or 8 to 10 cups of regular green tea. The matcha group showed significant visceral fat reduction compared to control, and matcha is not a minor upgrade over regular green tea. Because you consume the whole ground leaf instead of just steeping and discarding it, matcha delivers roughly 137 times more EGCG per gram. Same plant. Radically different dose. Now, those first two methods work through food. They are things you can start today with a grocery run. But there is a reason I ranked them first and not last. They are the foundation, not the most powerful tool. Method 3 is where the physics of visceral fat really start working in your favor. Vigorous exercise. Not a casual jog, not a walk after dinner. Intense effort at 70 to 80% or more of your maximum heart rate. Here is why intensity matters so much for visceral fat specifically, and not just fat in general. Visceral fat is packed with beta-adrenergic receptors. Think of these as landing pads for adrenaline. When you push your body hard, your adrenal glands flood your bloodstream with catecholamines, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. These hormones bind to beta receptors on fat cells and trigger them to break open their stored triglycerides and release fatty acids into the blood. Visceral fat has far more of these receptors than subcutaneous fat, and because visceral fat also has that rich blood supply, the adrenaline reaches it faster, and the released fatty acids leave it faster. The same features that make visceral fat dangerous make it vulnerable. A meta-analysis of 84 randomized controlled trials confirmed it. Vigorous aerobic exercise and high-intensity interval training were the most effective methods for visceral fat reduction. Moderate and low-intensity exercise barely moved the needle on visceral fat specifically. One study tracked participants doing just 2 45-minute cycling sessions per week at vigorous intensity. In 2 months, their visceral fat dropped by 48%. And the burn does not stop when you step off the bike. Post-exercise oxygen consumption, the elevated metabolic rate your body sustains after hard effort, continues oxidizing visceral fat for hours after your session ends. So methods 1 through 3 in combination give you a powerful daily protocol. Carotenoid-rich food reprogramming your fat genes, green tea catechins blocking fat absorption and amplifying fat-burning signals, and vigorous exercise mobilizing visceral fat through its own receptor biology. For most people, this combination will produce real, measurable visceral fat loss, but I promised you a fourth method. One that makes the first 3 look slow. This is where the protocol leaves the world of grocery stores and gym sessions and enters clinical territory. Method 4 is medically supervised water-only fasting, not intermittent fasting, not a juice cleanse, not skipping lunch. This is consuming nothing but water for 7 to 14 consecutive days under direct medical monitoring at a supervised facility. When you stop eating entirely for that long, your body enters deep ketosis within days. It needs fuel, and it goes hunting for it. The first place it raids is visceral fat. The reason is the same biology we already covered. Visceral fat has more blood supply and more beta receptors. It is the easiest fat depot to access in an emergency. Your body treats prolonged fasting as that emergency and dismantles visceral fat preferentially. Like stripping a building for parts, starting with the most accessible materials first. The clinical data is striking. Patients lost approximately 10% of their total body weight in roughly 2 weeks. Blood pressure in hypertensive patients dropped an average of 60 points systolic. Insulin sensitivity improved dramatically as the liver and peripheral tissues reset their signaling. But the most fascinating result comes after the fast ends. During the supervised refeeding phase, when patients gradually reintroduce food, visceral fat kept declining. It did not rebound. Meanwhile, lean muscle mass fully recovered. In some cases, it exceeded the pre-fast baseline at the 6-week follow-up. The body prioritized rebuilding muscle over restoring visceral fat, as if it recognized that fat as pathological and chose not to replace it. And the secondary effects go deep. Your kidneys flush excess sodium stores during prolonged fasting, a process called natriuresis. This reduces fluid retention and disrupts the cycle of sodium-driven overeating that many people do not even realize they are trapped in. Stored toxins, things like PCBs, dioxins, and organochlorine pesticides that accumulate in fat tissue over years, get mobilized and processed by the liver for elimination. Your autonomic nervous system rebalances, reducing the chronic cortisol output that promotes visceral fat storage in the first place. And perhaps most surprisingly, your taste buds and reward circuits reset. After a prolonged fast, whole foods taste profoundly satisfying. The pull of processed, hyper-palatable food weakens significantly. Your brain stops demanding the things that were building visceral fat. This is not a casual undertaking. It is a medical procedure with real physiological demands that requires professional supervision and clinical monitoring throughout. But for those with access to a supervised fasting facility, it is the single fastest method that exists for eliminating visceral fat. So here is where you stand. You came in thinking belly fat is belly fat and that losing it means eating less and moving more. Now you know that visceral fat is a different tissue entirely. It has its own receptor biology, its own blood supply, and its own vulnerabilities. And those vulnerabilities give you a clear ranked protocol. Method 1. Carotenoid-rich vegetables with dietary fat every day. Carrots, cooked tomatoes, sweet potatoes, spinach. They reprogram your visceral fat cells at the genetic level. Method 2. Green tea catechins. 2 to 3 cups of matcha daily to block fat absorption, activate fat burning, and sustain the hormonal signals that drain visceral depots. Method 3. Vigorous cardio or HIIT at 70% or higher of your max heart rate 45 minutes, 2 to 3 times per week. This floods your visceral fat with the exact hormones its receptors are built to respond to. Those 3 together are the daily protocol. For those who want the fastest result possible, Method 4 exists. Medically supervised water fasting at a clinical facility. It is not casual. It is not optional. It is the most aggressive visceral fat intervention that exists, and it requires professional oversight from start to finish. Every single method on this list works by activating machinery your body already has. The receptor density is already there. The blood supply is already there. The genetic switches are already installed. You are not adding anything foreign. You are triggering systems that have been waiting for the right signal. That fat wrapped around your liver and pancreas, the shrink wrap that was silently poisoning your organs from the inside, it is not an immovable part of you. It is a target. And now you know exactly how to hit it.